Namaskar. Welcome to the Sunday editorial. Acha, petrol prices have gone up. Diesel prices have gone up. Now, Adani's, I am told, is increasing airport tariff, especially Lucknow airport tariff, by 10 times. Chances are they will gradually increase all the other airports too. Airports which they own, which are 6 airports, which they have on lease. So, if airport tariff goes up by 10 times, flying will be almost impossible for a common man. My question tonight, therefore, is if your transport becomes so expensive, like I said, petrol and diesel anyway expensive, flying anyway expensive, how are businesses going to grow? Travel is a very integral part of the growth of a business. Number one. Number two, is air travel going to be out of bound of a normal Indian, of a middle class Indian? A middle class Indian would never be now able to dream of flying if the prices are going to grow such. I wanted to know more about this. I invited Captain Mohan Ranganathan, the aviation expert. I'm sure all of you all know him. I invited him to my show and he graciously agreed to give me an interview. And let's learn more about what are the implications of tariff growth. What are the implications if the tariff grows like this? What are the implications of tariff growth on airport tax? Let's understand from him what are the implications of tariff growth on air travel. Let's get right into the show. Captain Ranganathan, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
The cost of airports, the cost of flying is now going to increase. First of all, Captain, tell me, what is your view on this? The prices, if travel becomes so expensive, how is business going to grow?
Business will not grow because if travel is expensive, because what we saw the growth in the last 15 years prior to the pandemic was because the tickets were cheap. So a family could travel for a holiday together. If you take the flying before 2005, very few family holidays were there. It was mostly business or compulsory travel. And when the prices were high. When the LCC started, you found that people were selling tickets at 1,000 rupees and 2,000 rupees. So a family of 4, it would cost them only 8,000 to travel. So it was very easy on their pocket to have a holiday. The whole idea was that they could travel, but then numbers were being fudged even then to show profits, which was not the fact.
So flying will not be a common man's travel anymore.
It will not even be an airline's thing anymore, because you will find that many airlines can't afford. The as it is now, take for instance the 10 times increase. Now, just a few months back, if you recall, Adani said they enforced that force measure to delay the payment for 3 airports. Now suddenly and then very next month they had money to buy up Mumbai airport.
Yes.
So it is not, the public sector banks are ready to feed all these people. And now if you look at the 10 times increase, now he's got 6 airports. Now what is the increase on? Corporate aircraft, business jets, international travel. Now, what kind of international travel and corporate flying do you have out of Lucknow? I can understand if they increased it for Mumbai, where there's a lot of international travel. I mean, it's restricted now, but that is where you have the maximum international travel, or Delhi, or Bangalore and places like that. Lucknow does not have. If you actually look beyond what has been, the BJP's whole idea, they didn't care about the spread of pandemic. They had only the West Bengal elections in focus, the faced this election, which spread the COVID like crazy apart from Kumbh. Now, after they got beaten in Kerala, they thought they were going to win many seats in Kerala. They didn't win. They thought they could capture a lot in Tamil Nadu. They didn't get. And they got wiped out in West Bengal. So now they are worried about an election next year, which is 8 months away. So, which is the airport which is important for that election? Is Lucknow. That is where the travel is going to come. Now, if you look, who's going to be using the corporate and the charter aircraft? It's the opposition parties. Because if Modi and Amit Shah were to travel, they'll use the government aircrafts. So they don't come under this. So the target is to make money out of people who will be traveling for the elections. Because there is no other logic in Lucknow being the airport for the 10 times increase.
They say that the same thing is going to be the fate of Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Guwahati, Bangalore and Thiruvananthapuram very soon.
They will not do it for the simple reason, if you increase it 10 times, the landing charges and the handling charges, you will find no airline is going to bear that. The airlines are going to pass it on to the passengers. And what I'm surprised is you have AERA, which is supposed to decide on the cost of operations. Now, it is all being bypassed. They would have found some loophole to increase. Now, if you find airports like Mangalore and Trivandrum, I can tell you that the next target will be Trivandrum, not even Mangalore. Because already they've started the administrators trying to muzzle and take over Lakshadweep, move out all the inhabitants there, and they want to make it into a luxury resort like Malé. And I wouldn't be surprised if it is handed over to one of either Adani's or Ambani's, which will be the chosen ones to take over the resorts over there. And they have Trivandrum Airport, so they can have international charter flights, wide bodies coming into Trivandrum, and they will move them to Lakshadweep. The whole target is that this is just a feeler to see how people react, and then they will move to the others.
They say that jet operators are not happy with the service. While you're increasing the price, but there is no improvement in the service. What exactly do you mean by jet operators are not happy with the service? As a layman, what do I understand?
See, you got to have, when you talk of the service, the ground handling. Now, when airlines used to have their own ground handlers, they have the equipment for loading and unloading. They want minimum time. And then when you have the baggage onto the baggage the tractions, they must have modern equipment to identify and split the baggages, send it to the correct carousel. But if you don't have that, none of these airports have that except Mumbai and Bangalore, and otherwise it's manually handled. Now, they're not going to give proper handling. You will find that there'll be delays. So if the airline schedule is based on a certain minimum turnaround time, if the service is not provided, like if you don't have aero bridges, you have to have buses taking the passengers to the aircraft. So if the buses are slow and if it's not frequent, flights are going to be delayed. So it is the airline which gets affected when the handling is not. So when you want to charge, take for instance Singapore. In Changi, SATS handles everything, but it's so professional, they don't care whether you're Singapore Airlines or Air India or Ethiopian Airways, they will just handle everybody the same way. And passengers are happy. But over here, you don't have that kind of service. So if you charge more, if you don't provide the facility, the modern facility, then you're the loser.
How can somebody charge 10 times? I mean, what is the logic of this business decision?
Very simple. When they bid for these airports, they had inside information and they bid a higher price than others so that they can get the airports. Now, because of the pandemic, the passenger loads have dropped. And you have the fixed Like without AERA's permission, you cannot increase the user development fees and things like that beyond a certain limit. It depends on the cost that AERA fixes. And then you have the price caps by DGCA. So how are they going to make the money that they are losing on these factors? So they are doing something which they know that they can do it without realizing. You see, I'm not commenting. I really don't know who's advising them. If they think that it's like if you try to take with the left hand, you're going to lose the right hand. That is exactly what's going to happen here. If you charge 10 times the amount, and if you take the handling charges for a corporate aircraft, a small one, what you're going to get is going to be much less than what you'll get for a big jet. Now, this is just a feeler to start, and then they will apply it for private carriers. And in the bargain, you'll find more and more people will avoid those airports. That is what is going to happen.
Does a state government has any right to kind of put a stop to increasing of tariff in their particular state?
No, state government can't fix because the airport civil aviation comes under the central government. Like when state governments don't even have the rights to handle the vaccines, do you think they'll be able to handle something which has always been the civil aviation, the central government's domain?
No, but is there a provision to go to court, for instance?
How many cases have gone against the government by the courts during the last 10 years? Just think back. You see, what they have to realize, like there is an expression which I've used even in one of the earlier things. My English professor used to tell us, hasten slowly, and we've had so many other expressions like walk, don't run. Now, these people are thinking that I have the government support, I can do what I want. But they don't realize the consequences. You see, if you think that some bean counter in the audit department must have said, this is the way to make money. So they pass the orders and they take the decisions. And whatever they decide, the Civil Aviation Ministry, they're all puppets. They're going to agree to whatever the Adanis want. They're not going to say, no, you can't do it. But if we had a sensible regulator, they can put a stop to it. Actually,
sir,
the DGCA can, but they won't do it.
You are making an allegation that the DGCA is a puppet or the Aviation Ministry is a puppet. Sir, how do we make this kind of allegation? What is there to substantiate? How can you substantiate this kind of allegation?
I'm telling you, they have never, now from the last 15, 20 years we've seen, ever since the Babus took over, there's not been a single question. And I can give you a positive thing that was way back in 2007 when they passed this flight and duty time regulation. One of the civil aviation regulations came out, a beautiful one. The airlines went crying to Praful Patel, who was the civil aviation minister, saying that this will mean they have to get a lot of crew. And the DGCA, then Mr. Gohen, signed a thing saying, cancelling the FTTL as per the directions of the... So he handed over the powers to the ministry. I have that letter in my hand. I have it in my laptop. So from then, nobody from DGCA, like you can go to the DGCA's office. Now you have one DGCA who's a Babu. The Civil Aviation Ministry has several Babus. And the minister who's clueless about aviation. So they will just dance to the tunes of whoever gives the orders and they will sign. So they are puppets, and I'm making it's not an allegation. Everybody in aviation knows that.
The fact that 6 airports were given to one individual, that also is not one individual, one company, that also possibly is not the best practice, is it?
No, not at all. Like when you give a running of an airport to someone, they've got to have some experience in running an airport. So if they don't even have the experience in that field, then how do you expect them to run the thing efficiently? You see, running an airport is not just a fancy building. You also have to have the main heart and brain of the runway is a runway. They have no experience. They will try to cut costs on safety issues. They will only be interested in profit issues. Someone who's not aviation savvy.
Sir, if that's the case, then obviously what you said earlier may not stand true, because then they will increase the fares for all their airports. Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Guwahati, Mangalore, Trivandrum, they will increase the rates of all the airports, wouldn't they? Tariffs of all the airports. My apologies.
They will first see how this reacts. They know that even if there is no increase in civil aviation traffic in the next 8 months, but they know that the political equation, the traffic will be there till the UP elections are over. So they can cash in and they'll see how this pans out. If they find that they are able to make the money here, you will find it will spread to the other airports. If they find that they don't, if they are wise, they won't increase it for the other airports.
How do you see aviation in the next 5 years?
Next 5 years, I would say that definitely the next 3 years, it is status quo. Until total international traffic builds up, tourism builds up, aviation is not going to build up. And right now, with all this COVID, no vaccination, the tourism industry is completely killed. The hospitality industry is killed. So until the income, like we talk of putting money into the poor man's hands, unless for air travel, it is not that it's like taking a bus and going somewhere. So unless you have the money in your hand to travel somewhere, not if it's an official business, somebody is paying for your trip. So that is the kind of travel which will slowly build up. As far as tourism and leisure travel is concerned, I don't expect anything in the next 5 years. If the second wave hadn't come, I would have said that maybe in 3 more years. But with this and the way it is being handled by the government, I would say another 5 years for Indian aviation to pick up.
And what is your advice to Indian aviation?
Downsize. Get out of ego. Have to admit that the traffic is not going to build up. You got to stop. You have to consolidate. The ego of I have a bigger airline or you have more money is not going to work. They have to consolidate. They have to downsize. We do not have the traffic for so many aircrafts. There's no point in getting 200 aircrafts and then operating 50% of your capacity with 20% passenger load. You're not going to make money because you are buying the aircraft and leasing it, and the lease is in dollars. And whatever you sell here, without international tourism, you're going to be earning in rupees. And you can't service your dollar loans with rupees. So you will find more and more people are going to be holding up, and there'll be no travel. So the only solution is downsize. You have to accept that air travel is only a necessity, is not a luxury anymore. You have to think of that for the next 3 years at least.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
You're welcome, Sujit.
पता है इन सब लोगों में एक चीज कॉमन है। गैस करिए क्या? नहीं पता? चलिए एक हिंट देती हूँ। ये सब आपके परिवार से जुड़े हैं। अरे फिर भी नहीं पहचाना आपने इन्हें? चलिए कोई बात नहीं, वैसे भी ये लोग पर्दे के पीछे ही तो काम करते थे। इन सब की डेथ हो गई है कोविड से, ताकि आप और आपका परिवार सेफ रह सके। और यही तो है परिवार का मतलब, अपनों की रक्षा करना। जो हमारे लिए जान दे सकते हैं वो अपने सगे नहीं तो फिर कौन है? मुंबई पुलिस।